At this time, we'd like to call the September 6, 2023 textbook meeting to an agenda to order. We will start with our workshop and move on from that. So remember to turn your mics on when you're speaking. And so we will start with introduction of the commission members and opening remarks for our workshop. And we will start with Christy, if that's okay.
Good morning, Christy Wall, Assistant Commissioner of Academics for Instructional Strategy, representing the Department of Education.
Nikki Jones Wallace, Library Coordinator, Tennessee Department of Education.
I'm Deborah Chancellor, as appointed by Speaker Sexton, and I represent the primary teachers.
Lee Houston, appointed by Cameron Sexton. I am a librarian in Crossville.
I'm William Bryan. I was appointed to the commission by Governor Lee. I'm a high school teacher in West Tennessee.
I'm Linda Cash. I'm the Director of Schools for Bradley County, and I was appointed by Lieutenant Governor McNally.
Mike Bell, I was appointed by Lieutenant Governor McNally.
Daniel French, I was appointed by Governor Lee, and I'm the West Tennessee representative.
Kathy Hickey, I'm the East Tennessee representative for middle school.
Lori Cardoza Moore, appointed by Speaker Sexton to represent the parents and citizens.
Katie Cabshaw, appointed by Lieutenant Governor McNally. I'm a librarian in Middle Tennessee.
So we thank everybody for being here. I do want to just start with some opening remarks and reviewing what our roles and responsibilities are and kind of going back through our library guidance. So in the Quality Commission Policy, Rule 1.20, Role and Responsibilities, it is the duty of the Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission to prepare a list of standard editions of textbook and instructional materials for approval by the State Board of Education for use in public schools for the state. This list shall not include supplemental materials. The Commission shall prepare a list of at least 4 books of sets of instructional materials in each subject and grade for which textbooks or instructional materials are to be adopted. If 4 or more textbooks or sets of instructional materials in subject or grade are available and of sufficient merit to warrant being listed. Upon the approval of the State Board of Education, the Commission shall publish the list of textbooks and instructional materials that may be adopted by local boards of education for use in the schools of this state. The list shall contain the title of the textbooks, the instructional materials listed for adoption, the names of the publishers, and the price at which the books and materials are available, as provided in TCA Title 49-6, Part 22. And the list shall be published in accordance with the rules, regulations, and policies and procedures of the State Publications Committee. The proposed textbook and instructional materials list shall also be posted on the website. And in 1.300, just a reminder that you are to serve until a new member is appointed, and we have within a 12-month position, the chair of the commission may recommend appointing authority of there. Notice that in the textbook and instructional material that notice of each regular meeting of the commission shall be posted on the department's website within 3 full business days of the day the commission set the meeting date. And then locations will be there, and they need to be live streamed, and we do have some special called meetings. Also, I noticed that in order for a speaker, they have to notify the secretary of the commission at least 15 business days prior to the scheduled meeting, and they have to give their name, address, phone number, email address, and the organization or agency of the individual will be representing. Also, there will be a time limit, and no person, committee, or delegation not on the agenda shall be heard. You must be recognized by the chairman, and there will be a limited amount of time to speak. Also, the commission shall confine, all speakers should confine their remarks to the recognition by the chairman. It must be relevant to the mission of the commission, textbook commission. So in that, I also wanted to just briefly review library guidance that we passed in March with 49.63801, just giving a few highlights that I think are important. And that is, if you follow it, in the guidance process within the law, if the local Board of Education or public charter school governing body determines the material contained in the school's library collection is not appropriate for the age and material levels of the students who access the material, or it's not suitable for consistent with the education mission of the school, then the school shall remove the material from the library. The LEA governing body of public or charter school can develop or implement other policies, practices, or procedures for the removal of materials from a library section. However, our guidance goes back to the district should provide a form for employees, students, or parents, guardians to submit to the district. And I want to repeat that. It is that the employee, students, or parent guardians to submit to the district. That is the district responsibility. It is not this commission's responsibility. Also, at a minimum in the process, it says the request the employee, student, or parent guardian to submit the request for reconsideration of the library forms, and then upon the receipt of the completed forms, they shall notify the director of schools, the principal, and then they have, the principal shall request review of the challenge materials by the Ad Hoc Materials Review Committee within 14 days of the completed form and notification of the director of schools. Then it outlines what the review committee is responsible for, but the appeals process is what I really wanted to go back to, knowing that it starts at the school level with a parent, employee, or student concern. If it's not settled there, it can go to the Board of Education. If someone at that point wants to appeal, this would be the process for submitting appeal to the commission. Requests for appeals may be submitted to the Textbook Commission via the Textbook Commission website within 5 days of the local Board of Education or public charter school governing the decision. The request for an appeal shall be sent to the chair of the Textbook Commission and the Department of Education liaison for the Textbook Commission. So you would reach out to TDOE, and that would be routed that way. You have to include documentation evidence the local Board of Education or public charter schools governing body's decision. And then upon receipt of the appeal, the Textbook Commission shall request supporting documentation from the LEA. So there is a process that has to take place before it can come to the appeals, starting at the local level. And then just wanted to review that. I think there have been some questions about that process, just knowing that it starts at the local level, and we are the final chain if there's not a solution, but it does have to go through that process. Are there anything else that you want to add to that process? I just wanted on statement to say it starts at the local level. Virginia, any? Christy? Sure.
Madam Chair, the resources articulating the library guidance are located on the Textbook Commission website under additional resources. And so the language that you just read, the library guidance that this commission developed, is retrievable and accessible for the public to utilize through the website.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
And then from that, we will move on to our second workshop, September 6th. This is the agenda items listed below, and we will start with review of the science materials adoption schedule, the draft science instructional materials scoring rubric, and then the science adoption advisory panelist. And we are responsible for approving those forms. So if there's no objection, I will turn it over to Ms. Virginia Mayfield to review the science materials adoption schedule, which we've already approved. I just thought we probably needed to review that.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. So I'm going to just highlight a couple of the things that are on this schedule that occur between this convening of the commission and your next convening in January, just to kind of frame out why some of the things are in your packet that we're chatting about today. So the first one is in January of 2024. This commission is charged with selecting your advisory panel, which are the individuals that will help you review the science materials that will come before the commission next spring. So that happens in January. Additionally, in January, you will approve on final reading the rubric for scoring those science materials. We're going to do a kind of a flyby today and look at the resource that we've put together for you, get your feedback. We would love to know anything what you like, what you don't like. Are there things you would like to change off of that rubric so we can bring it on final reading in January? Also in January, you will set some scoring expectations that go along with those scoring rubrics. So because of that, and knowing that in in October, we are releasing and calling for advisory panelists. One of the things we're going to do today is per the request of your commission chair. I've provided for you, and we're going to talk about it here in a little bit, the application that was used to hire advisory panelists for mathematics. So it gives you kind of a starting place to talk about building that same type of an application for science. That would go out in October. It will go out by the Commissioner's Update for Directors from the department is the avenue that we have to release that document. The deadline for individuals to apply as set by the schedule is November 22nd, 2023. We would then bring those applications to you as a commission in January to decide how you want to score them. And what decisions you want to make around that so that those individuals can start work in April. That's one of the major things that happens between the two. On the publisher front, we will have a publisher meeting later in September, probably towards the very end of September. We will make a preliminary notification for intent to bid. We'll basically invite and say, hey, we would love to know if you're going to bid materials for our science adoption. We ask that those be returned to the department by November the 17th, 2023. That is not a binding agreement by publishers. The binding agreements come later in the spring. It's just kind of a courtesy to let us know they're intending to bid. That will let you as a commission know how many advisory panelists you need to hire, right? Because how many people you need to review is directly correlated to how many books are sitting on the table that you need to use the rubric with. So those are some of the actions that will happen with publishers this fall. So really the items on your agenda today are two things, really. We need to make sure that we get preliminary feedback on the rubric and then the advisory panelist application. So that's why we're doing those two things. Any questions about the schedule before I jump into the rubric?
And my apologies, we are in the science adoption process. So that's what everything that we're doing now is around the science adoption.
With the exception of a single math book that we had a course that came in late. So we will use the already approved math rubric to review math, reasoning, and decision making. We will use that with those to follow suit for the other math materials. It's the one that, because it was a brand new course, had brand new standards, it didn't make it through with the other math materials. So it's going to tag along with science. But it will use the same rubric that you've already approved. Okay?
Thank you.
Any other questions before we go into the science rubric? Lovely. So the science rubric that we have submitted is a representation of grade 2. We tried to follow suit with what this commission had asked previously with mathematics and tried to build the rubric very similarly. I will caveat, if you look in your back at your schedule, it said that we would have the standards review team provide some feedback in August. We did that prior to bringing this rubric to you. So the committee that helped develop the science standards with the State Board of Education, they have already reviewed and given feedback on this rubric per the request that this commission had made for mathematics. We went ahead and got ahead of that and have already taken care of that. If you'll notice, the materials scoring rubric is set up very, very similarly to mathematics. In that the first thing it talks about is instructional focus. One of the things we learned through the mathematics process was that we needed probably a little more clarity in a true rubric for what a 0, a 1, and a 2 really are. And so you'll notice that that has been added in the instructional focus part of this particular rubric. That gets to the instructional focus that is called out within the academic standards, because what this commission is tasked with is making sure that the instructional materials that go forward in the state align to our Tennessee academic standards. So that is the instructional focus that's been pulled from that. That is the very first table that you see. It takes up 2 pages. The next table is attending to the multiple dimensions of science, which are your science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts. Those are also embedded within the academic standards for science and very clearly defines what a 0, a 1, or a 2 is. The accessibility features is identical to what it was for mathematics in that ensuring that we have digital forms as well as printable forms for materials, as well as making sure that there are supports for our students with disabilities and English language learners. To be very honest, the reason that is not built out much more than just a call out that they're there is those things are very personal to districts. What one district might need as far as English language learner supports might be very different from another depending on their population. The same thing for students with disabilities. So those are really local level decisions beyond this particular commission, and in that, it doesn't really relate to the standards. We want to make sure that those are there, that we have accessibility for students with disabilities, that we have accessibility for English language learners, and that we have digital options available for districts. Beyond that, that doesn't touch the standards. The very last table on this chart is alignment of content. Those are the second grade standards that were approved by the State Board of Education, and then a place for the advisory panelists to score them, a 0, 1, or 2, a 0 being that the standard is not there, a 1 being that the standard is present, but some components may be missing, and then a 2 indicating that that standard is present with all aspects of the metric fully met. With that, I'm going to pause. I just gave a lot of words to you. What questions do you have on this particular rubric? What feedback do you have for us? We will bring this back to you in January again for final reading. But what can we answer?
Virginia. On the first rubric, we start with 210, and then we go to 012. I just think that might be confusing.
Which
when
way
they're
do you-
scoring. It doesn't matter. I just think it just needs to be so that way we're going the same. If they're scoring, they might get the 2 and the 0 flipped around.
So does the commission have a preference as to which one they want? Which you prefer? Do you prefer 210 or 012? 012? Okay.
Ms. Mayfield, the one question that I have that I just really want it to be very clear is that we are certain that that the textbooks look at all science standards. And I didn't see, I think on the last one, we actually had those worded in there, all standards are met at some point. I know we've got the standards listed, but I think that is important that that be on there, that all science standards are, I don't know the language that we used, somebody else might addressed or present. I'm not sure what we,
I'll pull it off the math one.
okay.
Yes, thank you. I was thinking on the same line, on that first rubric where you have the scoring of 0, 1, or 2, it says the metric. Can you substitute standard for the word metric? So that would be,
On page 1?
yes.
Yes, ma'am.
And then in the other part of the rubric, everywhere that it says SEP, I know that means science engineering practice, but can we not substitute the word standard for that?
The practices aren't necessarily specific standards. They're the way we go about teaching science as opposed to the content. So I'm afraid it's going to confuse the advisory panelists who are classroom teachers. Would you like us to get some feedback from some teachers maybe? Or
I am a teacher. I just
yeah.
retired, but I am very clear on that. But when it doesn't say standard exactly in this rubric, then I don't see that we're hitting where we thought the focus was so important in math, that 100% of the standards are taught.
Okay. So, let me make sure that I'm correct, that I captured what you just said to me. So under scoring, change metric to standard on page 1. And then on the third table where it says direct distribution of SEPs.
Yes, everywhere that it says SEPs, I understand that, but it doesn't say anywhere in here 100% of the standards. I know we want to teach the SEPs, but
Right.
we still aren't focusing on the grade level standards.
So we will weave grade level standards into that.
Yes, please.
I gotcha.
Thank you.
Other feedback?
Just one more from my perspective. I believe in the math standards, we also had language where it was all Tennessee. I'm not sure how we worded it. All Tennessee laws are in a, do you remember how we worded it?
It conforms to all the Tennessee state laws.
Yes,
That was bringing in the CRT.
Right.
And all that. And Common Core.
yes, that was the big one.
Got it?
One other thing. So you mentioned also that 0 is none, 1 is some, and 2 is all. We might want to add that in there just to be clear. In accessibility features and also alignment of content.
So would you like me to move the table that's on page 1 that talks about scoring? Because it doesn't really apply to that first table in that a 0, 1, and 2 is spelled out, nor the second table where 0, 1, and 2 is spelled out. It's really for accessibilities and alignment of content. Would you like that explanation moved to be explicitly above those two tables so it doesn't get lost in the directions before we get to that? Would that help?
Yeah, maybe for purposes of clarity for somebody who's just
Yep.
looking it over.
Virginia, it might even just be like a note on each of those pages because you're changing throughout. It might just need to be added on each page.
Yep. Happy to.
Are there any more comments related to the first look at the rubric? Okay, seeing none, if we can move on, please.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so the next item on your workshop agenda was the advisory panelist application. All I did was pull what you as a commission voted on for the math advisory panelist application. So the first information is just getting personal information from them, what district they're in, if they have a Tennessee teacher license, areas of endorsement, those types of things. As a commission, it was important to you last time to ask what state level committees and district level committees they'd had the opportunity to serve on. Excuse me, if they had reviewed any instructional materials in the past and describe what that experience looked like and sounded like, as well as articulating why they wanted to serve on this particular committee. All of those questions were scored by the commission when we did this for mathematics. Then at the end, you will see 2 questions and the word scoring task, which I'll talk through in just a hot second. Those are science specific. We removed the math questions that we had and put in questions about science to get to ensure that these advisory panelists have a deep understanding of the science content in the way that that would play out in an instructional material. So you have a question around most important components when reviewing science materials. It's really directly about the task that they're about to do. And then a question about instruction and what that looks like and sounds like for science. The scoring task would be similar to what it was for mathematics in that we chose a portion of an OER and actually had the advisory panelists use the rubric and see how that went and actually practice scoring the material, because that's what you're hiring them to do, is to use the rubric to then score an instructional material. Prior to this being released in October, I will get the edits that you requested to the scoring or to the rubric taken care of so that they are actually practicing with the rubric you saw today plus your requested additions. And that'll give us some feedback on clarity of the rubric and some things like that as well before you see that on final read. But it's really just the opportunity for those people to do the task that you're hiring them to do to show their proficiency on their ability to score a material with the rubric. So that's what I brought before you today at the request of Dr. Cash. Really just, it's for you to workshop so that we know what we need to put out in October to get some advisory panelist applications in for you to score in January.
May I suggest that we take off race, ethnicity? Do we need to know that?
Thank you, and Ms. Chancellor, I was getting ready to ask that same question. Actually, I'm looking at the statute here. There's nothing in the statute that requires that. And I was going to ask if we had, I think the statute also in 49.6.2201 L8 says the commission's authorized, in other words, we can promulgate rules and regulations for the recruitment of advisory panelists. If we've done that, is there anything in those rules that require that question? If there's not, the legislature, when they passed the statute, didn't ask us to ask that question, didn't put that down as one of the qualifications for it. And so, yes, I agree with you. And I would even say I would include gender.
I would too.
If the whole panelist was females and that's what we thought was best, then why do we need to know that? So I would ask that about both those, Ms. Chancellor, about gender and race and ethnicity, about why we need to have it on there when the statute that the legislature passed did not ask us to ask those questions.
Ms. Moore?
Chairman Cash, I agree with what you both have recommended here. I also wanted to ask, because when we went through this process the last time, what troubled me is that people who had already served on a committee to review the materials had higher scores at the end of the day than people who were more qualified, I believe. There was one gentleman that did not make the cut for the math, and I was shocked because of his experience and what he had already done in Williamson County and other counties. So where can we, I know it says areas of endorsement. Is that where we're supposed to consider the qualifications of the individual? Because if we have what state level committees have you served on, district level committees, and if we're asking people who have that kind of experience just because they've sat on a committee doesn't make them more qualified than someone who has actually been in the class teaching and has had some tremendous success. So how can we make sure that the people that we're going to be able to choose from are more than qualified to be able to fulfill that need, that position, as opposed to whether they served on a committee? I think the committee, serving on the committee, though, yeah, it has its benefits, but anybody can do it, especially someone who is highly qualified to teach science and has done a successful job in the past.
Instead of saying a committee, could you say on another advisory panel or textbook advisory panel, if that's what this application wants to know? Do you have this kind of experience? Not, have you been on some committee in a different area? Is
Yeah,
that
I
what you're
think
saying?
I think what I'm trying to get away from is that that serving on a panel makes them more qualified, because when we start adding up their numbers, it's going to be those candidates who are going to get, the endorsement. And we're going to look to them and say, these are the best qualified. I think if we can find some language to ensure and not use, that should be at the bottom. That shouldn't be one of the top qualifications. I think we need to look at the people who are doing this. And as I said, I use the example of what happened with an individual who had applied and was not chosen because he had never served on a committee before.
So are you wanting to maybe give a chance, an opportunity to people who haven't served on a committee, who have taught in the classroom? Is that what I feel like that's what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so I see where we say primary role in the school district, and we've asked if they've served on a committee. We haven't asked what they've taught and how long. So is that a question we could add? I think it is valid to know if they've served on a committee, and then we can decide if that's a pro or a con.
Right.
But also knowing what they've taught, how long they've taught, could also, like you said, give them also some merit, because I think there's merit to people who've done it, and then there's merit to giving new people an opportunity.
And couldn't you
Absolutely.
add to that? You're trying to get to the component of their expertise in the classroom.
That's
Couldn't you
correct.
So
add-
before you speak, if you would address to me, please, so that
Oh.
we can run a smooth meeting. Thank you.
Okay. That you would want to ask, a part of that question, what's your expertise in the classroom? And have you received any recognition for your classroom expertise in that area? Maybe they haven't been on a committee, but maybe they've been recognized in the classroom for equality.
Mr. Bell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Moore, I would say to your point, in 49.622.1 L, what's this, L1C, the legislature envisioned experts who are not teachers, experts who are not even higher education teachers, because when they put this language in here for the members of the advisory committee, they said experts who are not public school teachers. They may include college professors and any credentialed subject matter specialist. So it could be an engineer, it could be a doctor, it could be anybody who's a credentialed subject matter specialist, not somebody who just proclaims they're a subject matter specialist, but a credentialed subject matter specialist. So I don't really have a suggestion on the language we change to do this. That's maybe something that the department could help. You're hearing our concerns, you're hearing Ms. Moore's concerns, that maybe you could help with coming up with some language that would ensure that we had, that those credentialed subject matter specialists got the same recognition for that knowledge and credentialing that a teacher would have who'd served on a committee.
I wonder if it would help. So we asked the question, why do you want to serve on this committee? Which I think is a very valid question. I wonder if it's followed up, what are your credentials to serve on this committee? Because that gives you the opportunity they can flesh out exactly what you just talked about, that they're subject matter experts. So give them the opportunity and a place and their classroom experience and actually everything, how long you've taught, what you've taught, the classroom expertise you bring to the table. Every one of those bullets could totally fit underneath their description of, what's your expertise to be a part of this review committee, and it might wrap all of that into one. So thoughts about that recommendation? Does that meet the needs?
Madam Chair, I would like to recommend that we include they submit their CV so that we have the opportunity of reviewing their qualifications. Because I like the credentialed qualifications.
When you look at their full application, it actually outlines their work in pieces of that. I think that if this commission as a whole would like for them to include that, we can add that. But remember, we are one part of the role of choosing these. I would recommend that we go back into the language from the legislation and lift some of that to put in here, and we can work with that together. If I am remembering correctly, it's they are uploading quite a bit of information when they actually apply as well. This is just a round one, and if this committee wish to have their CVs and resumes, we can do that. But remember that we have no way to verify all that is on there. So I always recommend that if someone is turning one of those in, that it's verified information. So I will leave that up to this committee, and we don't have a system in place to verify all that they're doing. But if they are attaching their credentials and their license, those are things that can be verified. Any comments?
Dr. Cash, I agree with you that it should be all verified. And if it can't be verified, then it doesn't need to be anything that we look over.
So in moving forward in our workshop, I would like to recommend working with Virginia and and Mrs. Wall to pull language there and to add information about credentials as well as any licensure or anything that they hold. And that language that opens it up to other experts, that we add that in here. And that we remove gender and race and ethnicity. Does anyone have any objections to that? And you would see it again.
So I have on my list, we're removing gender, we're removing race and ethnicity. We are going to add a question around what is their credentials for doing this work, and then lift another question specifically out of the language of the statute that Mr. Bell read around subject matter expertise, and lift the language out of law for giving the opportunity for them to showcase what their qualifications are to do this work. Did I capture that accurately?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions, anything that needs to be taken care of in the workshop? Okay, seeing none, we will close the workshop and we will move on into our regularly scheduled agenda meeting for September 6, 2023. This is the Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission meeting agenda. We will start with our welcome and introduction. So I am calling to order at this time. Ms. Siddiqui, if you could do a roll call, please.
Yes, ma'am. Mike Bell,
Present.
Billy Bryan,
Present.
Linda Cash,
Present.
Deb Chancellor,
Present.
Lori Cardoza Moore,
Present.
Daniel French,
Present.
Kathy Hickey,
Present.
Lee Houston,
Present.
Katie Capshaw,
Present.
and the non-voting commissioner designee from the department, Christy Wall,
Present.
and the other non-voting commissionman designee, Miss Nikki Jones Wallace.
Present.
Thank you. And we'll start again with our introduction of commission members. And if it's okay, we'll start on this side this time with Ms. Capshaw.
Katie Capshaw, appointed by the Lieutenant Governor. I'm a librarian in Middle Tennessee.
Lori Cardoza Moore, appointed by Cameron Sexton, and I am here to represent parents and citizens.
Kathy Hickey, East Tennessee, representing middle school.
Daniel French, I was appointed by Governor Lee to represent the Western District of Tennessee.
Mike Bell, I was appointed by Lieutenant Governor McNally.
Linda Cash, appointed by Lieutenant Governor McNally.
William Bryan, I'm a high school teacher appointed by Governor Lee from West Tennessee.
Lee Houston, appointed by Speaker Sexton. I'm a librarian in Crossville.
I'm Deborah Chancellor. I was appointed by Speaker Sexton to represent the elementary teachers.
Nikki Jones Wallace, the library coordinator for the Tennessee Department of Education.
Christy Wall, Assistant Commissioner of Instructional Strategy for Academics, representing the department, and Commissioner Lizette Reynolds.
Thank you. At this time, we will have an adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion.
Do I have a
Second.
second? Thank you. Could we have a voice vote, please?
Mike Bell,
Yes.
Billy Bryan,
Yes.
Linda Cash,
Yes.
Deb Chancellor,
Yes.
Lori Cardoza Moore,
Yes.
Daniel French,
Yes.
Kathy Hickey,
Yes.
Lee Houston,
Yes.
Katie Capshaw.
Yes.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the approval action items. We need an approval of the minutes for March 10th, 2023. Could I have a motion, please?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call vote.
Mike Bell,
Yes.
sorry. Billy Bryan,
Yes.
Linda Cash,
Yes.
Deb Chancellor,
Yes.
Lori Cardoza Moore,
Yes.
Daniel French,
Yes.
Kathy Hickey,
Yes.
Lee Houston,
Yes.
Katie Capshaw.
Yes.
Yes. The next item on the agenda is election of our vice chair. Just a reminder that John decided not to stay on the committee because of other business in his district. So at this time, I will open the floor for an election of a vice chair. Mr. Bell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to nominate Ms. Lee Houston from Cumberland County for vice chair.
Are there any other nominations? Okay. Hearing none, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Certainly. Mike Bell,
Aye.
Billy Bryan,
Yes.
Linda Cash,
Yes.
Deb Chancellor,
Yes.
Lori Cardoza Moore,
Yes.
Daniel French,
Yes.
Kathy Hickey,
Yes.
Lee Houston,
Yes.
Katie Capshaw.
Yes.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the Science Adoption Advisory and Panelist application. I would like to have clarification of the changes that were suggested before we vote from Ms. Mayfield, please.
Thank you, Chair. The advisory panelist application will move forward as what was presented to this commission with the following edits made prior to it being released in October. Removing gender as a application field, removing race and ethnicity as an agenda field, adding in a question for the applicant to give their credentials and license, and then a final question that asks what their qualifications are specifically lifted out of statute to really get to their expertise and the expertise they bring to the table to do this work for the commission.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to accept those changes and to vote?
Can I ask one question?
Yes, sir.
Could I ask you one question? The suggested changes that we're going to have on how to, incorporate the credential part in there. I know we're getting ready to make a vote that's going to be final on something that we've not seen, which is a little, even though we've all got a good idea of what we ask you to do, we're still getting ready to vote on something we've not seen. Is there any process for this commission to vote remotely and have this sent to us and vote? And if not the whole commission voted, is there any way that the changes that before they are finalized, even though I don't see how we do that since we're getting ready to make a final vote, could be submitted to the chair for at least her to look at it?
I would always send to the chair before we release anything so that she can verify and guarantee. I will
Okay.
actually, on the request, the chair can send it out to this entire commission again prior to the release in October to ensure that we've captured what the commission wants. And if you have any issues with it or feel like we haven't quite met the bar, please let us know and we'll happily go back, and if you'll just communicate back and forth with
That
Linda
sounds
and
great.
myself.
I'm satisfied with that. Thank you.
Okay, absolutely.
Mr. Bell, so just for clarification, would you repeat your request, please?
That Ms. Mayfield and the department would submit the language of the credentialed questions to the board, to the chairman, and to the board for our review. Thank you for our review prior to it being published. Yep, and I don't know if this needs to be added, but at that time, if a member has a question, they can bring it up to the chair, and this item could be brought back at the next meeting.
Thank you. And so just for further clarification, we will Virginia and her team will make the changes with Christie reviewing it. Those changes will be reviewed by me, sent to all board members. And if there are no objections, we would move forward with pushing that out in October so that we could start the applications. Is that good? All right.
Madam Chair, I agree with Mike Bell and his assessment. Is there a way because I feel uncomfortable voting on something that I haven't seen. And is there a way for us to let the department make those changes, then submit them to us, and us provide a vote later on after we've looked at the final?
What you're voting on is to have the changes made for those to be sent out for comment. If at that time there are no controversial things or anything, it would move forward. If there was a need, we would have to call, honestly, a special called session to vote on that because it's a public item, and we would do that at that time if there's controversy.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Do I have a motion and a second? Would you do a roll call vote, please?
Mike Bell. Billy Bryan.
Yes.
Linda Cash.
Yes.
Deb Chancellor.
Yes.
Lori Cardoza Moore.
Yes.
Daniel French.
Yes.
Kathy Hickey.
Yes.
Lee Houston.
Yes.
Katie Capshaw.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. We have item D, library materials appeal. This will remain a standing item, and none were submitted for review by the deadline of August 6, 2023. And so our next item is to discuss meeting dates for our next meeting. So if you would look at your calendars for me. Holding in place a special called meeting for January 2024. But I do have one question, just so we could possibly reserve if we did need to come back to our science advisory panelist. Is Ms. Mayfield? Is there? Would you possibly have a brief timeline that if we needed to come back, we could, or how would you like to handle that, Christy? Do y'all?
As it would be a special called meeting, Dr. Cash, the only qualifying is that we have to have 10 business days ahead of it for public notification.
Okay.
So whenever that date is set, you just have to ensure that there is a 10-day out. It might be helpful if you would give the department a deadline for when you would need the application back and submit it out so that you would have a timeline to work with. Might be helpful.
Okay. For clarification, this was scheduled to go out in October at, do you have a date that was going to be pushed out in October, Christy or Ms. Mayfield?
On the schedule, it was October the 11th, 2023. Which the commission could change the schedule and push that later. That's another option that you have, is you could amend the schedule if October 11th seems too early for you. The applications don't come back before this commission until January. So you have a little bit of a play of time if you need it.
Thank you. I think we'll leave the schedule as is and try to get those changes out as fast as we can. And then from that, if we need to have a special called meeting, we will set some dates at that time, if that works for everybody here. I know some people struggle, and I'm not sure if the possibility, we'll research and see if we needed a special call, if we could do a virtual for this one item. I don't know exactly how that works with the rules, Mr. Bell.
And Virginia, it seems like some boards and commissions have a provision, and we just have to look into this one, that if a quorum is present, then others could vote remotely, but a quorum has to be present, if I remember correctly. But that's something, be nice when DOHR gets through with all their classification, and we have,
Yes.
love you, Virginia, but we have our own staff and attorney and everything to do this job. And I know you just soon not have to do this as well. And so, but when we have our own staff and our own attorney, it'll be nice to be able to turn these questions over to them.
We will send out some option dates for this committee to review and have that set aside. We'll try to get those out to you by the end of next week so that you can look at your schedules, just in case we need a special call just for this one item. Thank you. Sorry, if you would look at your calendars to check January of '24 to reserve a special called meeting, again, in case we need it. We always want it on there, since we are in the adoption cycle. Are there any dates that need to be avoided?
The second week would be tough for me.
I'm unavailable from the 29th on, but otherwise fine.
Is it possible for us to look at reserving Tuesday, the 16th, as a possible special called?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only thing we need to consider that would be during session. And, as long as we don't have to meet there at the Cordell Hall building, that would be fine. If we have to meet the Cordell Hall building, it would be getting with one of the clerks and scheduling a room, but that is during session.
So with no objections, we will look at the 16th as a possible special called as needed. And then if you will look in March, and this is where we start getting into spring break and some of those pieces, if we are again looking at
The week of the 18th.
is a no.
No, sorry. The week of the 25th is a no.
Okay, if we back up and we are looking at the date of Tuesday, March 5th, or Thursday, March 7th, is there a preference for the Tuesday or the Thursday? Okay, let's look at filling that in for Tuesday, March 6th.
March 5th.
5th, sorry. It would help if I were in the right year. Okay. Thank you so much. Are there any other business from the commission regarding our science adoption process? Anything from the department?
Yes, just to confirm the dates. So Tuesday, January the 16th is our tentative special called meeting planned for in person, correct,
Yes.
Chairman? Okay. And then Tuesday, March the 5th, also preference is in person to be planned for that regularly scheduled meeting, and perhaps utilizing Thursday, March the 7th as a backup
Yes.
option.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Having no further business, this session for for September 6th, 23 is adjourned. Thank you.